Hey everybody, welcome back to Ron's Personal Fitness. Today we're going to have our first discussion about exercise. Now, this will be the last of the talking head videos as far as the exercise is concerned. From here on in, we'll be filming actual exercises themselves, showing you the proper form and technique and why we would do a certain thing and just giving you the tips and tricks and the science behind the movements. But today we're going to talk about exercise in general. And where people have a little bit of a misconception is they look at athletes who have these fantastic athletic bodies, starting with a tennis player physique, swimmer's physique, gymnast physique, all the way up to a bodybuilder physique. And bodybuilders don't all take steroids. There are natural bodybuilders who, like myself, have remained drug free their entire life. So they're able to, over time, develop extra muscle than the average man on the street. Okay, the average Joe and Sally will have a certain amount of muscle, as a healthy lifestyle would give them, as opposed to someone who is training to develop their body to the next level. So when you see a football player, maybe not a lineman, they're a little bulky, but the wide receivers or the fullbacks and so on, and they've got a really good physique, it's not because they're doing what you're doing, and they're doing over and above. It just doesn't happen accidentally. Okay, so that's today's discussion: is exercise versus training. All right, and exercise. The best way to put it is you go to the gym, you work out 3 to 5 times a week. You go in, you do your routine. You don't care how much weight you lift. You may or may not have an idea what you're doing. You may look, oh, what's that guy doing? Oh, I'm going to go do that. Okay. With no idea why. And yes, you're moving the muscles under resistance and you are stimulating the muscles to burn glycogen, which will then turn, creating a need that your body will break down body fat for glycogen to restore and fill up the stores, so to speak. And all of that is great. That's how we stay healthy. We move. We have to remain in a maintenance or calorie deficit and be very active. We want to get on average 10,000 steps a day. That's rather arbitrary. We know where that number came from, and I'll share that with you now. They studied populations throughout the globe that have longevity, that seem to live the longest: Asian cultures, Scandinavian cultures, and so on. And they just kind of followed. The researchers just watched them and said, what are these people doing differently that allows them to live longer than the rest of the world? And when they obviously found that these cultures actually eat the least amount of food, we just talked about calorie deficits, and they walked on average, or took on average, 10,000 steps a day. 10 to 12,000 actually. Well, mainstream exercise scientists said, voila, 10,000 steps is the key to longevity. Maybe it's 12,000, maybe it's 4,000. We've never studied that. But what we did study is that's one thing that these populations were doing on a consistent basis. So there's nothing wrong with an arbitrary 10,000 steps. It's probably more than adequate for most people. But don't get hung up on, tracking every step you take, or, have your little pedometer or whatever. And, oh no, I only got 8,427 steps today. Okay, that's another 1,500. Okay, no, 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 no. Just going around the block one more time has more benefit than just hitting the 10,000 steps. Okay, if that's what you need for motivation, though, if that is your motivation, is that your app or your watch or your pedometer clicks over to 10,000 steps a day, congratulations, it's done its job. But just know that that is not a guarantee that that is going to keep you or make you healthy. Okay? It is a piece of the puzzle, it is a tool that we use to make sure that we're getting the activity that we need. Now, on the flip side of that, let's say you start a regimented exercise program. Again, not training, we're not training for a sport yet, but I'm going to start participating in exercise. Oh, cardiovascular training. Yeah, that's very important. I'm going to go 30 minutes on the treadmill. Okay. And then the rest of the day, you failed to take the steps you were taking before because you felt like you had this goal to reach. I already did my cardio. I already did my 30 minutes earlier in the day. And you're going to fall really short of your total daily energy expenditure. And what will happen is those people generally don't alter their diet right away, and they start putting on weight saying, wait, I am exercising. It must be all muscle. I hate to tell you, muscle doesn't grow that quickly unless you are absolutely, fresh to the gym. You've never lifted a weight a day in your life. And yes, the results will come quickly. But if you've existed for any extended period of time, you're not going to put on muscle at such a rapid rate that you can see it within a week or two. But the scale will change because you have changed your energy expenditure, which all gets wrapped up and rolled up into what exercise is. And that is movement, that is energy. So, going back to what I said before, if your program is to go to the gym and lift weights for 45 minutes every day, kind of randomly or, till I feel like, boy, I feel great. Well, congratulations. If you're in an energy expenditure or a deficit, a food deficit, you will lose weight. Okay. And you're going to stimulate the muscle a little bit. All right. All of that's great. Helps with your cardiovascular fitness, helps with the efficiency in which our body digests food and utilizes the nutrients in our food because we're giving it a reason to. Okay? If we're bedridden, then those things don't work very well. But if we're active, those things do work very well. And that's being part of an exercise program. Okay? That is dare I say, the bare minimum that a human being should participate in. Now, let's say that you want to go to the next step. Well, now you're putting yourself into training, okay? You are going to exercise with a science-based resistance program that will determine what body parts are to be worked when, how much rest in between, how many repetitions, how many sets over the course of a week is how we want to kind of look at those. And when we look at the science behind it, we see that anywhere between 5 and 30 repetitions per set. With obviously, if you're only getting 5, 6, or 7 repetitions, it's going to be very heavy. It's going to be quite the load, quite the resistance. If you can wrap out 30 of anything, the weight is very light. But science has shown us that you will still stimulate the muscle into a growth situation called hypertrophy. Muscles can do 3 things. They can hypertrophy or get bigger, they can stay the same, or they can atrophy and get smaller. Now, you are born with all the muscle fibers you will ever have. if you go into hard training, you will stimulate those muscle fibers to produce things like sarcomeres and make them where they not only get bigger in hypertrophy, but we add things to the muscles, and that's called hyperplasia. And there are types of muscle fibers that will kind of sit back and they will wait to be signaled whether they're going to be a strength fiber or an endurance fiber. All right. And I believe these are called type 2B fibers. So we have endurance fibers, we have strength fibers, slow twitch, fast twitch, but then we have these other guys that are kind of androgynous in a way that they can be whatever we need them to be. And if you're in a strength training program, guess what? Now you have more strength fibers. The fiber was always there. The muscle fiber that you were born with has just been sitting there waiting to be told what to be, if it's one of those type 2B fibers, okay? So when we're doing these things, we can actually cause more tissue to appear, okay? And that's where we see a more prominent muscle, okay? The muscle belly is there, and boy, I can feel that, and that's different, okay? So I have to be in the most efficient program that I can be in if I'm in training. I'm not going to waste my time with randomness. I'm not going to waste my time with arbitrary movements. I'm going to study up and I'm going to learn what the best muscle, the best movement for that muscle is. And I could, go as far as to study the physics of exercise, which I've done, and tell you what angle that muscle's being pulled from. All muscles pull and shorten. Even in a pressing motion, we kind of break up our workout sometimes into pulling or pushing, but they're always pulling. Your muscle is always shortening in order to execute its force on the resistance, okay? Even in a bench press, my pectoralis muscle is shortening from the humeral side to the sternal side with a little clavicular involvement up here at the clavicle, okay? They attach over here across the rib cage. So they are balling up. They're shortening across that muscle. Just like my bicep will shorten as I bring my arm, or the lower part of my arm, towards my shoulder, okay? So I want to know what angles, especially like a bunch of back muscles, they kind of have different angles that they're working from. I want to know what the best exercises are so that I can devote pretty heavy resistance training to those movements. And I want to perform between 10 and 20 sets per week for that body part. All right. Now I'm better off doing it each body part twice a week and doing 5 to 10 on workout A and 5 to 10 on workout B sets of exercise, so that by the end of the week I have 10 to 20 sets of exercise performed for that body part. All right. If I only have time to get in the gym today and work legs, I'm going to do at least 10 sets, because if I know I don't have the rest of the week to repeat it, I'm going to run in and get 10 sets for legs so that I've hit that kind of minimum for the week. And that'll allow them to recover. And next week I'll try to split them up so that I don't have to overload them so much at once. So these are things that you want to keep in mind and keep track of. So between 5 and 30 repetitions per set, 10 to 20 sets per body part per week. Okay? Now you're in training. Now is when you are going to, we use the term repetitions in reserve, RIR. Okay? that tells me the intensity of each set. So that as I'm doing an exercise, okay, I'm doing my press, and I'm 7, 8, 9. Oh, I better rack it, okay? I don't think I could have got 10. So I had at least one in reserve because 10 would have been absolute failure potentially in my mind. If I come to failure and I have to rely on the machine or helpers, spotters to catch the weight for me, I left no reps in reserve. And believe it or not, that's not the best way to hypertrophy the muscle. You want to leave 2, 3, 4, depending on your intensity level, in reserve. Okay? Now, if you're doing 30 repetitions with such a light weight and you shaking through it and you got 30, yeah, you still could probably get 5 or 6 more because the weight's so light. What you don't want to do is end up 29 and 30, where you have 30 reps in reserve, or 8, 9, 10, because 10's a magic number, I'm going to rack the weight. No, you might have had 8 or 9 in reserve and didn't know it. That's too much. Too many reps in reserve means that you've worked out with too low of an intensity. Now, you don't want to go to failure every time. You're not a power lifter. If you are a power lifter, even you don't go to failure until your competition. You still do 2, 3, 4 repetitions with very heavy weight, but you may go to failure on 4. Okay, you're not failing at 1. You're not doing a single until your competition because you don't want to injure yourself. So the lower our rep range, the heavier the weight, the lower the reps in reserve, the more potential for injury. Now, I'm not saying that that's an automatic recipe for disaster. I'm just saying that you have to be careful. You have to make sure that you're under control. You don't want to just throw the weight around. Okay? Which brings us to our tempo. So our tempo for each exercise is going to be fairly explosive on the way up, whatever the concentric or where the muscle is contracting. Okay? Remember, they're all contracting, they're all shortening. So we just have to look when is, if I'm doing a pull down, this is the concentric. This is the eccentric as I'm elongating. Okay, those both start with an E. I'm elongating the muscle. So during my eccentric or negative phase, some people call the concentric phase positive, and the eccentric phase is negative, okay? So during my eccentric negative phase, so I've pressed the weight, I'm going to resist it for about a count of 4, all right? And I'm going to keep going until I'm trying to hold it back, and it's just returning back, okay? And then with some in reserve, I'm going to end that set. If I got way less than I had planned to get with that weight, I might need to lower the weight. If I got way more than I thought I was going to get, I may need to add weight and keep these sets from being 30 all the time, okay? With that said, if you are failing for complete range of motion of the concentric movement, total lockout, which even that's not favorable. So we want to stop just short of lockout so that none of the muscles have a chance to rest. Okay? Remember, we're trying to stimulate these muscles. We're not just in the gym to wait for that clock to get around for an hour so we can leave. This isn't punishment. This isn't a sentence. You're going in there, you only have an hour to stimulate those muscles. If your workout is lasting more than an hour and 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you're an hour and a half, 2 hours, first of all, your intensity is way too low. And second of all, you're tapping into reserves that need to be used for recovery later. As a point, resistance training, we don't get bigger in the gym, we get bigger at bed. when we sleep, and we get bigger at the dinner table by eating our protein, not just junk. Okay. The action of exercise, of resistance training, putting a muscle under resistance at the cell level is destructive to that muscle. We are breaking it down. We are tearing it apart. Not injuriously, we're not ripping it off the bone. It's just within the fibers, we're literally tearing it apart. We're causing vast amounts of chemical reactions to take place. Our body really doesn't like that, all right? So what it'll do is over the course of the next 72 hours, let's go 24 to 72 hours, and that depends on the muscle group. All right, we'll get into this later in another video. But within 24 to 72 hours, that muscle has recovered. All right, providing you've provided it with enough amino acids, enough protein to be broken down into amino acids in our diet, enough nutrients in our foods, okay, vitamins, minerals, and so on. Then the repair can take place. But it doesn't do it in the gym. It does it when you go to sleep. And if you don't eat properly, you don't give it the fuel and the tools that your body needs to repair the damage. And because our body doesn't like that, it will repair it a little bit thicker, a little bit stronger than it was before. So that the next time I encounter a 25-pound dumbbell for that exercise, it feels lighter. I'm now stronger. And when I can do too many repetitions with that weight, I'll grab the 30s, bringing my repetitions back down, breaking the muscles apart. If I just stay with that 25-pound resistance and I'm not progressive in my resistance as I train, and I'm talking about from week to week, okay? If I'm not being progressive, either adding reps, adding sets, adding weight, resistance, up to a point. I don't want to do 100 sets of 100 reps, okay? But you get my point. So I'm going to add weight. I'm going to add resistance to stimulate that muscle again and again and again and again to actually create an inflammatory response that our body has to respond to because of chemical signaling, and it makes you stronger. And a stronger muscle will eventually be a bigger muscle. And I can say inversely that a bigger muscle is always a stronger muscle. Unless you are so dehydrated and, that type of thing. But if you are well hydrated and your muscle cells are nice and round, and maybe you're taking creatine to ensure that that's happening, creatine monohydrate, then they can exert more leverage. So you're going to be stronger. Okay? So now you're really in training. You're not just some guy who's arbitrarily picking a weight off the rack or, that girl just got off. I'm not even going to move the pin. I don't care. Okay? It's not about ego and lifting more than the girl. It's about doing what's appropriate for you. It might be less weight. She might be stronger than you. But my point is, you haven't done anything to personalize that exercise for your set to give you the maximum results from doing that set. Okay? So, to recap, excuse me, I'm going to do somewhere between 5 and 30 repetitions per set. I'm going to do somewhere between 10 and 20 sets per body part per week. And I'm going to utilize resistance that I can leave a few reps in reserve so I'm approaching the precipice, the threshold of failure without going over, okay? Closest to $1 without going over type of game show stuff, okay? So am I going to know what all of those numbers are, what my weight resistance is going to be, how many reps in reserve? No, I have no idea when I first start out. It's an experiment, okay? I'll know if I hit failure because I can't do another one. The muscle will grind to a halt. You will fail to do a concentric movement. Now, as I was about to say, as you're going through your concentric movements, even if you want to wrap out one or two partials down here where the muscles are stretched, if I'm doing one arm tricep extensions with a dumbbell and it gets down here and I can only get it just past my head, as long as the muscle is in a stretched position, when you're doing that, you'll get something out of that too. But those don't count towards your reps in reserve because we're talking about full concentric. Okay? I extended my set with a few partials, but those don't count. They count towards growth. They count a lot towards growth, actually. In fact, there's 4 out of 5 studies recently that showed that partial movements done when the muscle is in the stretched position. For example, if I'm doing a bench press, it's not the up here, it's the down here. The muscle is stretched here, okay? But if I'm doing little partial jobbies up here, that's nothing. That's a waste of my time, okay? But the 4 out of 5 studies showed that this promoted more hypertrophy, more enlargement of those muscles than the full range of motion sets. And that's because I would venture they were using more resistance. They were using more load. And as a result, it put more stress on the muscle, especially at the stretch position. Our muscles that glide along each other microscopically, okay? We call that the actin-myosin bridge, all right? There is a point where the muscle stretches and then it wants to contract very heavily because of what we call the stretch reflex. And that's to prevent the muscle from ripping, okay? It comes out here and they're starting to get, boom, it wants to go back here where it has a lot more surface area. They don't actually touch. The chemicals move back and forth. It's something you learn in anatomy and physiology. But this actin-myosin bridge, here there's a lot of connections, if you will, chemically. Out here, there's not. They're in space. So I don't want to, if I do that, I rip it. So my stretch reflex is going to provide some more contractile portion of that muscle, okay, of that movement, okay? So anyway, all that to say this, that you can, if you're, really pushing for the most out of your training, you can use stretched range partials as a tool to extend your set, okay? We also do negative training where someone, or if the machine, maybe there's somewhere you put your feet down to help move the handle forward, those types of things. You're not doing the positive, the concentric, but you're going to resist it all the way down as slow as you can. That's negative training. And research that's been around for a long time have shown that we can lower under control roughly a third more weight than we can lift. So if I can bench press 100 pounds, I can lower 130 under control. So that's a technique to help build strength, which stronger muscles are bigger muscles, right? Usually, okay? So that, most of what I just said is training, not exercise. Exercise, you don't think about any of that stuff. You just go into the gym and you just go, that felt good. Oh, I like this one. Oh, my machine's open over there. Oh man, this is great. Okay? If that's your intensity level, you're merely exercising. All right? Walking for 30 minutes is exercise. Walking the dog is exercise. Housekeeping is exercise. Okay? But it's not training. So if you say, I'm going to the gym to train, that's that next level where you're going to pay attention to reps, sets, intensity, range of motion, reps in reserve, all of those things. Okay? So my point is, don't kind of fool yourself. Don't convince yourself that you're, man, I don't know why I can't I don't look like I work out. I wonder why. Well, you may not be training. You may be exercising. Okay? And if you're doing it because you want to keep your joints safe so that as you get older and older, you got to keep from falling and stuff like that, well, of course, that we do that all the time. Functional exercise is very important, but it's not training. All right? So, by the way, if you're looking for changes in the mirror, with the silhouette will change of what we just said, right? Stronger muscles become bigger muscles over time. But if you're looking for the cuts, the definition, being ripped, that's from your diet. Okay, so they go hand in hand. And you'll notice that on all of my logos and everything like that, it's a triangle, right? One side of the triangle says nutrition, one side says cardio, and one side says strength training. Because they are balanced. It is an equilateral triangle. Strength training, cardiovascular training, and nutrition all go to make the whole person. All right? So if you're doing all of these things with a level of intensity that you'll see results, you're going to be thrilled. If you don't, you might want to step up your game. If you think you're in training, check yourself at the door and make sure that you actually are in training, and leave your ego with it at the door. We don't lift a weight for any other reason other than that is the correct weight for me to meet all of those other criteria we just discussed. All right? If someone comes up and says, how much can you bench? Fire back, how fast can you run a mile? Or some other, course of study. Well, what did you get on your physics exam? Who cares? All right? My point is, nobody cares how much you can bench. If you look like you can bench a lot and you don't, they're going to just say that he's just working out. If you're working with a weight that's way too heavy, they're going to see that too, and no one's impressed with that. So who cares? Who cares? If someone is using more weight than you are today, they have just taken the time to develop themselves and their strength, and maybe they did nothing but work on strength. Maybe they did the lower end of their rep range with higher weights their whole life, because that's all they cared about was getting stronger. Okay? So, there's a lot of good advice out there. There's a lot of bad advice out there. But if you follow these simple rules, you'll get the most out of your workouts. Next week, next Thursday, I'll show you what those workouts start to look like. All right? So I'm Ron from Ron's Personal Fitness. And until I see you, be careful, get in the gym, and cut your calories. We'll see you. Bye, everybody.